All right, welcome back to Rec and Roll. We are honored today to be joined by Drew Nolosco, the global brand manager of the Transformers trading card game by Wizards of the Coast. Drew, it's been a while. How are you and the team holding up under social distancing?
I'm holding up well. I'm holding up so well that I'm a little bit worried about myself. Like, oh, people and interactions and stuff. I remember those. But no, Wizards has been really good about making sure that we are equipped with all the tools that we need to work from home. And the first couple of weeks were rough. This is completely obfuscated to you guys, but I'm very much a believer in the sneaker net, where you walk over and convey information powered by your own legs to someone else's desk.
Mm-hmm.
I like those in-person conversations. They resolve things really quickly, and I couldn't do it. I was like, oh my god, what do I do?
Mm-hmm.
How do I do this? And after that transition period, it's been going well.
Cool, very good to hear.
How are you guys doing?
Same as that. I'm a little less like you. I don't really care to interact with people too much, so this is just normal every day for me. I'm not that affected by it.
I'm mostly okay. I'm a teacher in my everyday job, so it's been an adjustment to get used to. It's not so much of like a one-to-one connection where you're teaching, but now it's more like I prepare a lesson and then they do it on their own. They email me with questions. So it's been an adjustment in that way, but making it work.
Cool. Well, I hear you have questions for me.
Most definitely. So before we start to get down to the nitty-gritty, just a couple quick icebreaker questions. Number one, what has been your quarantine snack of choice?
This is really weird, but caramelized onions.
Okay.
I used to cook a lot, and being in quarantine has helped me reconnect with cooking all of my own food. And I found that just like chopping an onion, sticking it in a pot with a little bit of butter and letting it caramelize is just like, it goes great on toast, it goes great on meat, it goes great on sandwiches. So it also doesn't require me to stand over and watch it, so I can put it on like an hour before lunch, and then suddenly my sandwich has delicious onions. That's probably not what you were expecting to hear.
No, that's an awesome answer. That's cool.
Also, onions are cheap. So,
and they last a while too, yeah.
Drew, during your interview with Blues on Attack, you mentioned you were a whiskey guy. What is your whiskey of choice?
It's a complicated question. I'll try and keep this answer simpler. So I really like peaty scotches. And I'm a really big fan of that heavy smoke hit. So I had a couple of times the Artberg Supernova, which is like one of the peatiest scotches the world has ever seen. And it kind of ruined peaty scotches for me. But my go-to everyday scotch is Lefroy 10.
Okay.
And I also I'm not a purist. I very much like scotch and cocktails as well. And so that it's a great mixing scotch.
Nice.
Noted.
Okay. And then in a number of recent interviews, you've mentioned getting back into Dungeons and Dragons to help stay in touch with your friends and family.
Yes.
What is your preferred D&D race and class to play as?
So I like variety in life. So how about this? I'll just tell you what I'm playing right now. Mm-hmm. I'm playing a human thief in my friend's campaign, and the thief subclass of rogue, and that's I believe we're doing Descent into Avernus is secretly what's actually going on here.
Okay, cool.
And then in my other game, I'm actually the DM.
Nice.
And that game is weird. It's a Spelljammer campaign, which is the old D&D in outer space. And so I would say the GIF, which are humanoid hippopotami, very much like smoke powder guns, would be my favorite class and race there.
Very cool. And then Joe has one more quick warm-up question.
Also, back to the Blues on Attack interview. I'm just checking in with you. I know it's been like maybe a week or a week and a half since that interview. I'm just checking in to see how the Starscream's cake card is coming along, and if you need help from myself or Wreck and Roll or BOA, let us know. We're willing to help out.
Oh, we got it. We're good.
Okay.
I appreciate the volunteer for help, and I'll reinterpret that as I saw you commented a couple places that Starscream's Cape would complete your vision of Starscream in the trading card game.
Beautiful.
And if any of the listeners out there have other obscure, I mean, Starscream's Cape's not super obscure, nor is the Crown, but if you guys have obscure equipment style things from the Transformers greater IP, just make it known.
Fair enough. You may have opened the floodgates.
Yeah,
there.
we don't want people to send 7,000 emails to you guys or whatnot. So.
Oh, I don't want to send 7,000 emails to you.
Right.
Me, I just signed you guys up.
Oh, well, Matt Smith has been doing pretty good.
Cool. And
spread the love around.
From here, Drew, we're going to move into questions specifically about Wave 5, Titan Masters Attack. So, Wave 5 was officially released about a week and a half ago. The spotlight feature for this wave are the Titan Masters, where the head of a character can pop off and function as its own mini character once the body has been KO'd. And then in addition to that, you've given us our third Titan in the form of Fortress Maximus. You've introduced stratagems, which offer alternative ways to use characters for both characters in Wave 5 and also from previous waves. You've also brought in the Wreckers as kind of like a sub-faction in the game. So, Joe, first question.
What excites you guys the most about Wave 5, whether it's a character or mechanic or whatever? Most exciting thing about Wave 5?
We went into Wave 5 with one very specific goal. And not even before we knew we settled on Titan Masters, or actually any of the other games, and that is we wanted to give players a lot of deck building options and diversity in Wave 5. That was a specific conscious brand goal here, and so I think we executed on that really well. And the thing that is most interesting to me is watching players' evaluations of cards change over the previous season, and now that we've seen Wave 5 release. And I'm not gonna call out any particular review or anything like that, but everybody went through this period I saw of this seems weak to wow, there are a lot of things here that there's a bunch of combinations I didn't think about. Now I have to look at those, and then to oh wow, there's a lot of stuff going on, and that's cool. And I think we satisfied that goal of deck building choice and options. And not everything we're going to make is competitively powerful, and some things are just outright not designed for competitive play, but give thematic brewers like the Dinobot stratagem. I would be really shocked if that sees competitive play. I would legitimately be shocked. But there's, when we get to that level of card design, that's as important to us in some respects as the cards that we know are going to see competitive play, like Quake. Because it satisfies a group of players, and their particular needs. I thought we did a great job there, and the next
Quake,
2 months will really tell. If I had to say what specific card I am most happy with, it would be the design teams designed for Tidal Wave, which continues to tickle me every time I play it.
Joe played him pretty recently.
Kevin and I gave a shot at it. We tried one blue, one orange, and we're learning how to go from 3 wide to 5 wide very quickly. It's interesting play mechanic.
Right, because there's very few, aside from Metroplex, there have been very, very few team builds where it's possible to up the number of characters who are in play. And so even that alone is just novel, and it changes the gameplay states. So I'm really, really happy with that card, or 3 cards,
or 5,
more specifically.
And then to build off that a little bit, Drew, can you give us a little bit of a peek behind the curtain when it comes to the process of creating a wave? So in this wave specifically, the Titan Masters were a mechanic that you guys had to get right. So how hard was it to get to a point with you guys where you were happy with how that design was working out?
So that's a complex question. So this is going to be a little bit of a complex answer. I mentioned in the past that there's basically two types of sets. There are sets that look at going in parallel with current larger Transformers toy brands, and those would be Siege 1 and Siege 2. And then there are throwback sets where we go into the history of the Transformers toy brands, and those would be things like Rise of the Combiners and Titan Masters Attack. And so that is one axis of thought on how we approach new waves. Are we looking to the future or looking to the past? And that's really sort of an IP-driven way of looking at it. But there's also the mechanics side of it, and those are completely separate discussions that merge in a lot of different places. So, for example, we had, as you might imagine, we've generated these lists of, hey, these are cool throwback themes that we could go to. Titan Masters, former Hammer Masters, we're high on that list. But that was less of Wave 5. We got there less of saying we are doing Titan Masters because it's the top of the list for throwbacks, and it was more of the what does the game need at this point, because we have more flexibility with the throwback sets than with the current toy line sets. There, our goal is be a parallel or an extension to what's going on in toy there, and we want to make sure that the mechanics reflect that. Whereas a throwback set, we can say, all right, we have an overriding goal that we want to make sure we get into the game. In this case, just a rapid expansion of deck building options. And another goal that we had was giving a way to power up some older cards while at the same time giving flexibility to cards that we put out new, and that was stratagems. And we then paired those goals with the IP choices that were available to us in the throwback set. And the mix and match nature of Titan Masters blended really well with that the team and deck building option goal. And so that's the point where we said, okay, these are the things that we need to start melding together. And then the design team continues and just iterates on that. Like there were, as you might expect, there were multiple versions of what Titan Master gameplay looked like, and it was a little bit before we settled on the final published rules for heads and bodies as being meeting our goals and in a way that gave rewarding and interesting gameplay. And then we did stratagems, and then we filled in a bunch of other stuff. In some ways, one of the most interesting bits of development was Fortress Maximus, who was one of the last Titan Masters that we did, because we wanted to see we needed to see the shape of the heads available to us, so that we could figure out what their power level was, so that when we made Fortress Maximus, when we had that second head, we knew what the options were, and we wanted to make sure that the gameplay just executed correctly. And so we could adjust Fortress Maximus up or down to the correct power level. And there were previous versions of Fortress Maximus that Matt Smith in particular was able to just do disgusting things with that I won't talk about. But I will say at one point, and this is not the way it actually works, but at one point that second head counted for everything.
Oh, wow.
And Matt just was wiping the floor with everything.
Yeah, man, yeah.
Together. So it's an iterative development process. It's a long development process. One thing that I would say that is a necessity for meeting the goals that we established for this is that there are a bunch of sub-themes. I think there are more sub-themes in this set than in any other wave. Titan Masters being the main theme. Stratagems is a whole new game mechanic. Wreckers is another sub-theme that's completely not not related to the main theme whatsoever.
Mhm.
And it works together as a mix, but I can see how some players are like, it's a little bit disjointed. I get that if you don't know that our goal was this variety added into the game.
That makes a lot of sense, and that you actually gave a great answer. That is a very good segue to like our next few questions. Joe, do you want to take the stratagem? Okay.
Wave 5 also introduced some nice support cards for cards from previous waves in the form of stratagems. Can you tell us a little bit about how you and the team decided which characters would get stratagems, especially the characters that were released in previous waves?
Yeah, there was a little bit of a wish list. And just like the community, we had these constant discussions of, I really wish character X I wish we'd done this a little bit differently. I wish it was a little bit better or a little bit worse. Like, it goes both ways, right?
Mhm.
Like, or I wish we had tweaked the mechanic in a slightly different way because this new thing that we're doing just doesn't boil in water. And this is effectively this wish list of could've, would've, should'ves from the past. And I believe, at this point I'm a little bit hazy on, I believe all of us contributed to that wish list for stratagems. And so in some ways, we were expressing the things that we felt we would love to have seen done a little bit differently in the game. And also at the same time, there was a stated goal for stratagems to show a wide variety of things that stratagems could do. I think that's really important when you introduce a new mechanic to a trading card game, is to say, here's this cool box that we're establishing, so and sort of like sketch it out by showing this is just completely metaphorical, but like here's a mechanic up in this corner, here's a mechanic down in that corner. Now you see that there's this distance in between that we can do cool things inside. And we consciously made stratagems that did a variety of different things. From I would say the four big hits that we had were adding additional traits, directly editing numbers on cards. That's Cosmos as the example. Tracks is the adding as a great example of the adding traits. The third was changing the evaluation of star cards with certain characters, and there's a variety of stratagems that let you play additional star cards, and I think the ones that are actually most successful are the ones that say you can play additional star of actions or whatever, right? Like, I like that when it's more specific there. And then the fourth was to go weird, and Sky Shadow Enigma is the banner card for go weird. It says, hey, there's this cool thing that you knew from the past, these combiners that you really like, and we're going to introduce this entire new game mechanic of stratagems and show you how those can connect in a way that feels really good. And Sky Shadow I like a lot because Sky Shadow brings in Titan Masters, Combiners, and Stratagems into one package and says, hey, the different puzzle pieces that make up the Transformers trading card games can be designed to interact in ways that are rewarding and fun to use. So that's the story of Stratagems.
It's a good story.
Yeah. You touched on this one a little bit, but so far, all of the waves for the TCG, aside from Wave 1, have been rooted in some of the toy lines, which also kind of branch out to other media. So, Rise of the Combiners matches up with Combiner Wars. Obviously, Siege 1 and 2 go with Siege, and then Titan Masters Attack matches up with Titan's Return. Is that something that is that a pattern that we are likely to see continue, or is there a possibility that you guys can maybe go into uncharted territory and almost kind of like create your own narrative, I guess?
So create our own narrative is a territory that we probably will not dive into, but can we go in other directions? We can. I think that, and I've said this before, and I'm gonna, like, this is something that I still believe to be true. the toy line is the grounding element for the Transformers trading card. We want there to be direct representation of toys in the TCG. That is, characters and versions of characters who were toys should be the solid foundation. However, having said that, there is room for us, and there always has been, and you've seen it in a bunch of places, to take in parts of the IP from other Hasbro sources, or Hasbro direct license sources like the IDW comic books. So, yes, we can go in other directions, but it's not something that I want to become the major part of the trading card game. Would I love to see a Lost Light set? Absolutely. And I'm not precluding stuff like that from happening, but that would not become I don't ever see that as the norm.
Mm-hmm.
I see aligning with something that's primarily toy as the norm, and then putting in cool stuff to layer on top of and around it. And here's a great example where everything just sort of works out. The Perceptor that we did, who's a Wrecker and Titan Master, that storyline originated in an IDW comic. The idea of Perceptor as a sniper, as having gone through a bunch of awful experiences that made him question his identity as an Autobot and his nature as a scientist, originated in comics and became a toy, and then is now in the trading card game. So there is that sort of vertical alignment that you're going to see throughout the Transformers, IP, and that's the space where we want to play most.
Awesome.
Good.
Yeah.
When we first interviewed you way back in Wave 1, all those many years ago.
Oh, man.
You mentioned your go-to deck.
That was like 2018, right?
Yes, it was.
Yeah, yep.
That feels very long ago.
It does.
It does. You mentioned that your go-to deck was a blue Decepticon tank deck. We never got to see that, by the way. So, in Wave 5, what's your current favorite go-to deck to play?
So it's an aggressive tidal wave deck.
And will we get to see it?
Sure, but not right now.
Okay, we'll take what we can get. Sure.
And okay, I will see if I can dig out that tank deck. Honestly, it's probably somewhere in my desk at work, and I am working from home. But I will see if I have that still assembled. I probably do in a deck box somewhere, and I'll see if I can find it.
Wow.
No promises.
And that's a really cool callback, because I think I asked you what your preferred alt mode would be for a character if you were able to make your own character. And you mentioned like a battleship type of thing, so the fact that we're cycling back to tidal wave is pretty cool.
Yeah.
So to kind of go from there, obviously we're huge fans of Wreckers. What led you guys to want to include them as part of Wave 5?
This was fan desire. We watch what the fans talk about, and many fan groups and contributors, content creators have talked frequently about their wish list of characters, and the Wreckers were so high on so many people's list. And there are one of the things that I value a lot is adding new characters to the game, and Titan Master's Attack really does that in spades. And the Wreckers were a nice collection of characters who had never appeared, and really gave us an opportunity to get characters like Whirl and Roadbuster in the game. And also, not insignificantly, we got to make a better version of Sergeant Cop.
We all appreciate that, definitely.
So this just goes to the community being clear about what they want is something that we listen to, and clearly, like, it's not a everybody asks and we get, but the body of players worldwide share common themes, and we see these in their communications. And so when things boil to the top, like Wreckers did over most of 2019, that's something that we definitely listen to.
Cool, it's great to hear. Yeah. To build off that a little bit, so we obviously had...
Sorry. Also, I forgot. was for you guys.
We may or may not have been fishing for that.
Okay. Actually, let me throw this back. Amongst the characters who have called themselves a wrecker, who is next on your list that you would want to see?
Oh, man, I had like a long list ready to go.
Well, he goes off on that tangent. I was very happy with Impactor. I could stop there, and I'm good. I like that.
Just a wrecker version of Impactor.
Well, no, when you guys did Impactor in the previous wave, that's fine. He doesn't need the record tag. We know what it is, but a Decepticon Impactor, they did that in the toy line, so I don't know if that's something you're allowed to do. I don't know how that works. Be nice to have a bad one.
There is precedent. I mean, that toy exists.
Yeah.
And that's why that character's there as part of Siege. The wreckers don't exist in that part of the Siege storyline, right? They haven't gotten to the point where the wreckers need to come about because Siege is a retelling. And that toy was available to us, and we wanted to get it in there. We also needed a Decepticon tank who fit that sort of spot.
Mm-hmm.
Good call. I like it.
Right. So I guess I'm hearing, in one way, your answer is an actual wrecker version of it.
Of who?
With a record tag trait.
I'm fine with just regular Impactor as is. I'm fine with that. I'm good to go. Whatever else you guys want to put cream on top, it's fine.
We'll take all the records you can
Yes.
get. If you guys did like a really deep cut and you got Rack and Ruin somehow, and like you somehow figured that out, that would be really cool. I don't know if there's
some other people who would be really interested in that as well.
Huh. Interesting.
The Rack and Ruin guys.
Interesting.
Yeah, Rack and Ruin's a challenging character. 2-in-1 characters are tough, right? And am I crazy here? No, Rack and Ruin are 2-in-1, and they don't have an alt mode, right?
Not that we've seen, I don't think. They're connected at the torso, like it's two characters next to each other.
Yeah, so I mean, we have mechanical ways to do characters that don't have an alt mode, right? That's easily done for us. We'd have to put some more serious thought. We looked at all the characters who had the tag wrecker as we were choosing who to go in here, and that character were challenging enough that would require some weirdness that we did not want to put that in a set that already had a bunch of other stuff. And so yeah, great, heard and understood.
Cool, thank you. And then I think Joe, you have the next one.
Did you finish that one?
No, I'm sorry. My apologies. We saw a bunch of characters with the Wrecker trait, and we also had a bunch of characters with the Beast trait. And I think that a lot of the community were really expecting there to be almost a similar level of. In Siege 2, we had the mercenary faction come in, and there was pretty dedicated battle card support there. Is it a possibility that there was initially like heavier support for those traits that eventually kind of changed out during the design process?
So for beasts, no. There will be a beast set one day. It's inevitable. And we want to save all that goodness for that set.
Gotcha.
Beasts is not a tribe that I'm super interested in supporting until we get Beast in wholesale.
Okay.
And I know that we've done that for some other traits. Like Motorcycle has an incredibly tiny amount of support for its like 5 characters, maybe 4. I can't remember offhand. And the difference I see is there were entire toy lines based around Beast Mode, whereas Motorcycles and some of the other more unusual alt modes like Train, Astro Train, I think, is the only character with the Train mode, right? Those modes don't define an entire toy line. And so, they can go in, they can show up, we'll throw a card in their direction once in a while, as we did with the Motorcycle Stratagem in this set. But Beast is kind of special because it has a huge amount of potential cards.
Cool.
As as for Wreckers, there were more Wreckers cards in much earlier versions of the set. And this, going back to how sets are made, in some ways, so designers tend to focus on, get assigned, depends on how the process and the leader at the time, but you're like, okay, all right, your job is to take a deep dive into the Wreckers and do Wrecker things and ideate on what that looks like. And you two folks are going to work on Titan Masters, and you're going to do stratagems. Like that's pretty and typical division of labor. And then people start commenting on the various designs, and then at some point they start getting integrated into a whole set. Right? Like we literally have we have this many cards we need to print, and we're going to assign this one there, and this one there, and this one there, and then there's like, once you get to the bottom of the list, there's like this many more card designs that it's like, okay, time to start triaging this, prioritizing what is absolutely necessary, what is nice to haves, and what is just gravy that could go somewhere else. And unfortunately, a bunch of the Wrecker support cards were really below that threshold for this set, primarily because of the number of cards that we needed to put in to support the main theme of Titan Masters.
Cool.
The community has identified Sky Shadow, Horrible, Fangry, and Perceptor as being some of the strongest characters early in this wave. From your experience developing and playtesting Wave 5, do you and the team have any characters you think that the community is overlooking?
I will say that I think that there are very strong secret action decks that use a variety of cards and characters not listed there. I also think that the power level of secret action decks varies a lot by what else is going on in the metagame, and do secret actions that specifically target what other decks are trying to do as their win condition, do they exist, and are they good enough? But I think that there are a couple of decks that are very, very good. And I wouldn't be surprised if there are some players who have a long history with playing control-style decks do well with secret action decks in the TMA metagame. As for those characters that you mentioned, yes, we had all not only identified, but I mean, we caused to happen those cards to be strong cards, right? Like that's the for a variety of different reasons, but yes, I think it's very interesting when you talk about power level, deck power level, when it's the power is assembled from lots of different components, as opposed to the power being contained very specifically in a small number of components. Like Sky Shadow, for example, is the power level is identifiable by looking at Sky Shadow 4 cards. You can say, I can do some number comparison. Check. This is probably pretty good. Whereas cards like Perceptor, you can do some number comparison, but you also need to know, like, you can make an awful Perceptor deck.
You probably will.
It's totally possible to make a bad deck, because if his card draw engine is not getting you great things, then and you've got a guy who can eventually get kind of big. But when you pair it with the right things, the character does very, very strong things. Whereas secret action decks are a whole bunch of things that, on their own, many players may not want to play. Like they need to come together and form a critical mass, and it needs to be the right critical mass at the right time. So that's one of the interesting bits about deck building. It's one of the bits about deck building that I find most interesting.
And then to kind of build off that a little bit too, in every wave we tend to see early on people gravitate towards aggressive orange decks, and then over time things kind of work themselves out. Blue decks gain a larger foothold. They kind of figure out how to counter those orange decks. right now with the prevalence of both pierce and direct damage, there's kind of like an early impression among some players that blue is going to have a tougher time. And in the past, I think you guys have mentioned that you don't really want games to go for a very long period of time. And the older style of blue deck tried to stack tough as much as possible and then just flip blue like crazy to just negate damage coming in. Do you and the team have any advice for players who want to play a mostly blue or a leaning blue deck for how to do that effectively in Wave 5?
So I think that I think it's interesting because one thing that I think is conflated in a lot of discussion, and this isn't pejorative, this is just how language works, is some people are using blue decks as a shorthand for control deck, right? And in our minds, they're very different things. Blue decks that just buff toughness through the roof is one method of playing a control deck. And right now, what we've done is we've added in a bunch of disruptive elements into the metagame so that control decks don't have to rely completely on stalling the game out via max blue damage. And secret actions are one part of that. But there are some others as well. And the direct damage is one of those ways. So this is cyclical, right? Like there'll be times when blue defense-based decks, that's really what they are stronger, and there'll be times when they're less strong. And we'll see how the metagame falls out. We arrived at this place because we did perceive that blue top decks were going, if we didn't add cards that were answers to that, we're going to get overpowered and lead gameplay to a place where we didn't want it to go. Because one of the things I found that you have to be really careful about for trading card game card design is, in the long run, if you're not careful, control decks get to use tools from the history of the game more effectively than aggro decks do. And so it's something that we wanted to make sure that we were not getting to that point very early in the, we're 2 years in, it's not very early. 5 sets in, we didn't want to see a metagame that was control matchup versus control matchup constant. And so we did those two things that you mentioned, and I'm glad everybody's recognized them. We increased the impact that Pierce has in the metagame, and we've added in more direct damage options so that players could have, for a variety of reasons. One of them was so that players could, with some card disadvantage, use spot removal in certain places.
Cool.
All right. So, Drew, about an hour and a half ago, you guys may have released a rules roundup. So this next question gets a little choppy, so I'm going to try to squish it down.
Sure.
Will there be any type of master FAQ or master RRG coming, and will the rules roundup go to a different schedule? I know you guys were probably bombarded these past couple of months, and with COVID cracking down on you guys, will rules roundup move to like a monthly thing, or are you going to try to stick it to the weekly thing, or what's going on there?
So we know that weekly actually didn't work for the majority of readers. It was too much information without any regard for really priority of getting that information out. So what we've done, and the rules reference roundup that you referenced, what we did is we looked at the themes for the questions that we were answering, we were getting asked, and we pulled out the themes that we saw most frequently asked. And this doesn't mean the same question was asked over and over again. Excuse me. But here's an example. And you see this in the change of format. Now, and we'll iterate on this too. I'm looking at it right now, and I see a place where I was just like, wow, I wish I had formatted that. But we'll put some things like an important rule for you to remember in, and then state that rule clearly, and then some example questions that we've got that represent places where the community needs clarification on how that rule is implemented with new cards. So in the card requirement section, it's important for us to reiterate that card requirements are inclusive, not exclusive. So it's and only. It's a and or gate effectively. And then so we state that, and then there's a bunch of questions that are talking about things that are specific to TMA, like now characters can be two factions. How does that affect card movement? So you'll notice this rules roundup has fewer questions in it than typical rules roundups do, especially the first ones after sets. But I feel that the team feels that they're much more high priority questions. And I stuck a Sky Tread question in there because we accidentally left it off the last round. Not perfect. And then what we'll do after this is we'll basically triage that list of questions as if they were bugs, right? Like, here are the things that we're not explaining clearly. We've gotten ones that we think are the highest priority. What's the next set of priorities? We'll get those out. And weekly was just too much. And I know that this means that some questions may be answered later in the process, but I feel like the way that we're doing this answers more players' questions earlier, and not us getting to something later just because an important question wasn't at the top of the email.
Definitely, and in the old system, it was nice that people could get the same question answered, but there would be the same question that would pop up over and over again, and this system's going to help cut that down too.
Right, exactly. Like, we literally got, I think, 100 questions in the various places where we can intake questions that were all some variety of, can I equip Matrix of Leadership to a Decepticon leader body with an Autobot? Right? Like, and I know why people ask these questions, right? They require clarification. But even though that question for a lot of super enfranchised players may be, okay, I can puzzle that out from rules, that says to us that the majority of players are having an issue here, so let's focus on that. What this does mean is that there's going to be some very technical, some questions that typically will only come up in the most competitive environments that may not get answered earlier in the process. And for those questions, those tend to be the ones where reading the card and taking it literally don't answer it. And weirdly, there was actually one that came up a bunch, which in various forms, but it's something happens based on a triggered effect. A card enters play after the point in the turn when that triggered effect would trigger. Does the game rewind and see that the triggered point happened? The answer is no. The game sees the card. The card sees the game state as it enters the game. And so we chose Alex Brock's version of this question, which was Crystal of Power, because we did get a bunch of Crystal of Power questions. Like, how does Blaster's ability interact with Crystal of Power? Now you can extrapolate that into a whole bunch of different answers. So I hope this works, and as always, please give us feedback. Does this work? If you see that we're missing major types of rules issues with this, let us know.
Most definitely. And shout out to Alex Brock. Yeah.
Drew, from here we wanted to branch out a few questions about the game in general.
Go for it.
At this point, the game is about 1.5 years old. What are you and the team most proud of in terms of what you've been able to accomplish, and how would you still like to grow?
So there's a very clear answer for me, but I'm not going to speak for the rest of the team here. Coordinating with our compatriots over at Hasbro on Siege was, I think, the single thing that I am most proud of, because it involved an enormous amount of coordination and collaboration, not just on the cards that represent toys from the Siege toy line, but also working with Hasbro so that we can include the characters who did not make it into the toy line for whatever reason, including a number of characters that we suggested, hey, this might fit really well here, and working with everybody from the toy team to the art team to the story team was a lot of close collaboration that I think paid off really nicely. So that's my answer.
Cool. If you don't mind me touching on that a little bit.
Go for it.
With Siege 2, you guys brought in mercenaries. And I don't know if I remember you ever talking about kind of like how that process exactly like how that process developed. How was that process of working with Hasbro to kind of get mercenaries not only into the game, but I think that you guys also basically debuted them as a faction in the universe in general.
It was actually, I believe that suggestion came from one of the managers over at Hasbro.
Okay. Well,
and it was actually a very easy process. I mean, it requires building trust. This is a lot of my background is in licensed gaming, like superheroes or whatever, or movies. And the most important thing is with any relationship where we are using someone else's IP, and even though we're all Hasbro, right? Like there are those people who work on the Transformers brand at Hasbro are the shepherds of that IP, and they care deeply about it. And so it's not a licensed game in the technical or legal sense, but we approached it that way in the sense of this is the same level of trust that we would establish with a licensed brand partner, and that allowed us to have these conversations at the level of trust where things like, oh, mercenaries can show up first in the trading card game became easier discussions than otherwise. So I'd like to say that this was easy, and in some ways the conversations were easy, but the process of getting to those conversations was required forethought and planning and trust.
it's really interesting. Yeah, it's cool. To go to a different topic here, I'm pretty sure that back when Wave 5 was first announced, you mentioned that a big push for OP for the year was going to concentrate on gameplay at local stores. And obviously the state of the world is a lot different than what everyone expected it would be right now. Do you have any advice for how Transformers TCG players can support their stores right now, especially when in-store play is pretty limited for most people? And then conversely, do you have any advice for what stores can do to help to support their local Transformers TCG community?
So it was an unfortunate timing. I mean, it was an unfortunate World Series of events.
Mm-hmm.
The unfortunate time of it was like I had said that thing, and then the world changed. So first and foremost, support your local game store. The local game stores, many of them are in areas where the ability to have people in the store is zero.
Mm-hmm.
But it's been really really cool watching how the ingenuity that permeates the entirety of the tabletop game industry is in full effect here, with stores doing curbside sales and pickup. Some stores, for the first time, setting up their own online store so their regulars can purchase directly from them. And I would say, I can't give a blanket answer because every local game store's situation is now even more unique than it was in the past. But I will say that there are ways to support your local game store by buying from your local game store. And I think that's even more important now than it was before. That's why we changed the way promos could be used for the set, so they didn't require in-store play. Clearly it's not going to happen, but we wanted to make sure the stores had those tools available to them to continue to build sales, like to be very frank about it, and community at the same time. As for players, so many players are connecting to play Transformers via various voice over IP and video over IP, and coming up with ingenious solutions to how to make that work. And really, I haven't really seen the community come up with any lack of strong desire to remain connected with folks, whether in their previously used to play together in the same store, or the friendships that have established across the globe. And those technological solutions are out there. That's the way we're staying connected now.
And based on that too, like we definitely appreciate how quick and responsive you guys were in helping to make Perceptor more available to local stores. So like you guys were very quick on that. Yeah.
Thank you.
It was even more important now that we make sure that all the desire that we could fulfill was fulfilled there.
We've had a lot of support for larger scale tournaments in the U.S., which we're obviously extremely thankful for. There are also large tournaments over in 1C sanctioned tournaments over in UK and Malaysia, I believe, or Southeastern Asia somewhere.
Yeah. So Malaysia is a hotbed of Transformers activity. I have definitely seen top Malaysian players in the English language forums and social media groups here. But there are a lot of players in Malaysia relative to its size who enjoy Transformers. So yes.
Good. Once the world opens back up again and we return to something normal, will any other of those types of events be in like different places, like maybe like a Canadian type of national event or like a South American one or something like that? Or are there other restrictions in place that you can't talk about?
It's not that I can't talk about them, it's that I choose not to, because this falls into the category of prognosticating about a world that I don't know. And this is answering that question in anything that even remotely looks like solid terms is a way to set up bad expectations. Would I love to see big tournaments throughout the world where Transformers is sold? You bet. And in fact, I was over at the UK Open, and I saw the fervor and excitement of the community over there. So it's not lack of player want. There's no lack of that. So we'll see what the world looks like, and as we see what that develops into over the rest of 2020. We'll be able to figure out what 2021 looks like. But we are for sure not going to be holding or encouraging anyone to hold large-scale events for the rest of this year.
And then we're starting to wrap things up here. As one of our last questions here, we often see other players mention that they'd love to see character X in the game. And you've mentioned
we just talked about that at length.
Right. You've mentioned before that like Grapple has a special place in your heart, and you were able to manifest him in the game. Is there any other favorite character on your list?
It's got him nearby.
Nice.
He's just out of camera range.
Have you gotten the Earthrise Grapple yet?
Gorgeous.
Yes.
It's gorgeous.
Are there any other characters?
It's probably everything I want out of a new Grapple.
He really is so good. Like, and then because him and Hoist were buddies in the show, like the Hoist looks really good next to him too.
Yep, they work out really nicely. I'm very impressed by all of the Earthrise toys that we've seen so far.
Do you have any other favorite characters that you would like to see in game that you've not been able to get into the game yet?
Yeah, there's a few. Yes, of course I have. But just to take this gigantic list that's in my head and not give a lot away, I would really like to finish out the mini vehicles from Gen 1 Years 1 and 2.
Okay.
And in particular, two characters that I would love to see in the game are Power Glide and Sea Spray.
I was going to say Huffer.
Power Glide. You have them on shelf?
No, I have a display of them.
It's like a poster of the 84, 85 toys.
Guys almost got them all.
And there's a whole bunch of things that count for that line that were not really that are probably not on that poster, right? Like the black and white little recolored version of the Bumblebee Cliffjumper balloon.
Yes.
Very obscure, technically part of the mini vehicles line. That's not what I'm talking about. I mean, I'm talking about the main toys that are part of this line. I had both. I think I had almost all of the ones that were at least sold at like Toys R Us at that point that I saved up and got. Warpath was the number one on that list for a long time for me. But Power Glide is probably next on that list, and Sea Spray third. Power Glide really kind of blew my mind as a kid because it was much more articulated than any of the other mini vehicles, and also probably more articulated than a lot of the other larger size characters as well, because it had a shoulder and an elbow joint. Things with it, and like I don't know whether we do that G1 version or like the 2015 version of Power Glide,
where it's like this big.
That I don't own that figure.
Okay.
I should rectify that. But that character, those two characters, I like.
Awesome.
Could do a Combiner War version with a stratagem and give it to a Superion wave too.
That's fair.
Certainly possible. Going back to that whole thing where we can take the puzzle pieces and stick them together in interesting ways. Yeah, sure.
Cool. So Drew, we're kind of getting near the end of our time here. Do you have anything else that you would like to add or say to the community?
Keep on trucking. Like the version of rollout, like for this is we have been rolling through this world situation, and everybody's crises and obstacles are different and unique, but we as a game community are in this together. Keep playing, keep in touch with the folks who you may not have heard from in a while.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the one thing I would ask of the community.
Mm-hmm.
As everybody is dealing with social distancing and quarantining and isolationing and whatever the version of that is in your community, some people may drop off the radar, and giving them a ring or a Facebook message or whatever can be really important for people's lives. So that's the other side of community. It exists even when we're not playing cards with them.
Questions for us?
Great advice. We appreciate you coming on to talk to us, and as always,
Absolutely.
we appreciate you and the team, conversing with us in the various different online social media worlds too.
Do you want him to
I
ask us
really
questions?
appreciate that.
Drew, do you have any
You guys
questions
have
for
your
us?
Say again?
Do you have any questions for us?
Yeah, I'm a bad Transformers fan, so who's that next to Devastator on the top shelf?
Who's next to Devastator? I'm
Yeah,
surprised you
left
could see Devastator. It's
Oh,
Predaking.
that's Predaking. I thought I saw the green and purple. I thought it was Devastator.
Green and purple?
Is it maybe?
Oh!
Yeah, the orange leg guy.
Orange.
Orange Leg Guy is
I can
definitely
only see, like-
Predaking.
I can only see the what looks like a Titan size.
Joe's going to try to manipulate the camera. Just give us 1 second here.
Oh, it's Predaking. Can't believe that is Devastator.
Yeah.
No, I was right. That's Devastator on the top shelf.
Mhm.
I only saw the very bottom of Predaking's left leg, and I was trying to figure out which combiner had that color orange plastic. And my mind blank. Anyway,
You should
that's
show
my
very
question for you.
very quick, Joe. Show the other side. When you guys did Rise of the Combiners, Joe went insane into getting all of the different Combiner Wars figures. So he has
Wow.
basically every single Combiner Wars combiner.
That is
As
gorgeous.
best of an angle as I can give you, Drew.
No, it's that is great.
And sorry, back to
I
Brian.
love it.
All right, Drew. So again, we definitely appreciate it. Thank you for your time. We hope that you remain safe and healthy. And again, just all we can say is thank you.
Thank you.
Absolutely. See you guys.
Take it easy.